He finally realized, okay, I got to say something. He was like, oh, I'm sorry. I don't know who this is, but I'm gonna marry her.
If you sign up for their program, you get a light-skinned, weird-faced wife that never do an interview.
Oh, man,
listen, in 20 years, won't do an interview.
When you met Steve, he was already married. And you walk in late to his show, late. You walked in late for a reason, for the attention, huh? Not even knowing you, he said, I'm gonna marry you. Girl, who you done call? Oshun, Ugly Fred Eye?
Something about Marjorie Harvey has never sat right, and the more you dig, the more it starts to feel like every man who ever got close to her ended up either locked up, left with nothing, or completely under her thumb, and Steve Harvey is no exception. Except Steve didn't end up in prison. He ended up on television telling you how to think like a man, while Marjorie runs the whole operation from behind the camera, and Katt Williams saw every single bit of this coming. Stick with me because this one goes deep. If you're new here, hit subscribe and turn on notifications because we're in the middle of something.
If I had a chance to talk to Katt about anything, I would just ask him what's wrong. Just what's wrong.
Don't get off the wall to dress some pity idiot boy who ain't got going for himself. Now you can stop your climb up on the wall so you can come down here and talk to his little punk. Don't do that, man. I stay away from it. Now, do I want to? Yes. Because I'm a human being and I'm good. I used to be a fighter and I still got hands. They slow, but if you get up on it real close, I can still knock your one. I just don't have the quickness I have, but I still don't have to turn my hip and away, and I knock your shot out. I shoot your perm straight out.
So let's start with what Katt actually said, because people keep acting like he was just throwing random shade at Steve Harvey, but no, Katt was specific, methodical, and he named a pattern, not a person. He said that comedians who want to make it in this industry sign up for a program, and part of that program is a light-skinned, weird-faced wife who never does interviews. Listen, he said, in 20 years, this woman has never sat down for a single interview anywhere. Nobody has ever talked to her. And then, Katt made it even more uncomfortable by saying that's not one person, that applies to 7 different people in the industry. 7. All ending up with the same type of woman the same way. Now, you can dismiss that as conspiracy talk, but then you actually look at Marjorie Harvey's life and the story starts writing itself. Because before Steve Harvey, there was Jim Townsend, her first husband, who wasn't just a regular guy, he was a kingpin. And word is, Marjorie wasn't just sitting at home being a supportive wife.
The social media fodder was upset with you for the way you finally responded to him. Mm-hmm. They said they felt like what he said about you was true because of the nature of your reaction.
Oh, well, see, first of all, I ain't really good at social media, so I didn't even know that was out there. But they can, like, really kiss most of the corners of my ass. Just because a person sits on the show and don't hesitate or say or and speaks eloquently, that don't mean it's true. That just don't mean it's true, man. Because we not in the same league, dog. We shooting at 2 different baskets. I shouldn't even have said nothing. I think that's kind of like hate and jealousy. And hate and jealousy is a form of grief. You're grieving because obviously all them people you talking about have something you either want or are something that you ain't. And you're grieving, and the funeral becomes the podcast. So now let me roast.
Sources say the FBI and the DEA had her on their radar for her own alleged criminal activity, and they apparently told Jim that if he didn't cooperate, she was going down because they had substantial evidence against her personally. Jim cooperated, still got indicted, trying to move 40 kilos, ended up with life in prison, served 26 years before Obama pardoned him in 2017, and Marjorie, she filed for divorce less than 5 years into his sentence and walked away completely clean, no charges, nothing, just gone. And here's where it gets messier, because right after leaving Jim, she didn't exactly take time to grieve or reflect. She started dating his cousin, Darnell Woods, who also happened to be a dealer, and Darnell is actually Lori Harvey's biological father. They got married sometime in the early 2000s, so now we've got 2 husbands, 2 dealers, 1 cousin, and Marjorie walking away from both situations without a scratch. And then Steve Harvey enters the picture.
If you sign up for their program, you get a light-skinned, weird-faced wife that never do an interview. Listen, in 20 years, won't do an interview. Nobody's ever talked to her, and that she's never been interviewed anywhere. And now, understand, I'm not talking about one person. What I just told you applies to 7 people. How they all end up with that. That's part of what you get. I came in this business saying I was gonna expose.
So I came late, came down front with my girlfriend. Our seats were right here at the front, right by the stage. So we were sitting here, the stage was here. So he's just quiet. He just keeps staring at me. So I'm waiting on him to make me a part of the show so we can get on with the show. So he stayed quiet so long staring at me. Now everybody in the club is looking at me. And so he finally realized, okay, I gotta say something. He was like, oh, I'm sorry. I don't know who this is, but I'm gonna marry her.
They supposedly first met in the late 90s at a comedy club in Memphis. Steve literally stopped his show mid-set and told the whole room he was going to marry this woman he'd never spoken to in his life. And Marjorie said she left after a few weeks because his money wasn't right back then. Come back to that, because that detail matters. So they reconnect in 2005, and suddenly she's interested again. And it's not a coincidence that by 2005, Steve had a hit sitcom and his career was about to go completely supernova. But here's the part that Steve and Marjorie have been hoping people would forget. Steve was still married to his second wife, Mary Shackelford, when he and Marjorie got back together. Mary has spoken publicly about this, and she said Steve was cheating on her with Marjorie the entire time before the divorce was even finalized. And when things finally fell apart, Mary didn't just lose a husband, she lost everything. Steve took their son Winton. She says he turned the boy against her, had her evicted from the house, stripped her of the businesses, the money, the cars, all of it. And she said he didn't do it alone. Insiders say it was Marjorie who mapped the whole thing out and told Steve exactly how to play it, including painting Mary as unstable in the press so that nobody would take her side.
When I think about how quickly he moved forward from me to Marjorie, that was disturbing.
And Steve ran with it, started calling Mary bitter and toxic, and claiming she was the one damaging their son. Classic deflection, classic misdirection, and Katt Williams called this out directly and said it was hurtful that his wife and children were being dragged into the mess when the beef was supposed to be with him. Now here's the layer that makes everything else click into place, because Marjorie didn't just settle into a quiet life after becoming Mrs. Harvey, she became obsessed with her daughter Lori, and not in a supportive way, in a calculated way. Sources close to the family have told outlets that Marjorie is fixated on pushing Lori into relationships with powerful men and teaching her how to maintain that lifestyle the same way she did. And the Michael B. Jordan situation is the perfect case study, because MBJ by all accounts was serious about Lori. Rumors were swirling that he was ready to propose, but wanted a prenup first, which is completely standard when you're worth the kind of money he's worth. And allegedly, Marjorie shut that down immediately.
My Winton took my Winton from me. He turned my son against me, had me evicted from our house, thrown out. All the businesses, all the money, the cars. At a moment when I was down and devastated, he maneuvered everything. He manipulated the courts, everything against me.
She supposedly doesn't believe in prenups, which is a fascinating position for a woman who has spent her entire adult life building wealth through marriages and has never walked away empty-handed. So Lori reportedly ended the relationship and moved on. And now you have to ask yourself who benefits from Lori staying unmarried and available, because it's not Lori, and it's definitely not Michael B. Jordan, and Katt Williams would tell you exactly who benefits. So Steve Harvey gets on the Pivot podcast recently, 2+ years after Katt's Club's Shay Shay interview, and he's still talking about it, still mad, calling Katt bitter and jealous, and saying they're not in the same league. And according to sources close to the Harvey camp, it's actually Marjorie who has been pushing Steve to keep responding publicly because she's the one who took Katt's comments the most personally, she's the one who felt exposed, and Steve is out here doing exactly what she tells him to do, which is kind of proving Katt's whole point, because if Steve were actually running his own life and calling his own shots, he would have let it go 2 years ago the way any secure person would. Instead, he went on a podcast and threatened to shoot Katt's perm out of his head, which is not the move of a man who's unbothered. That is, the move of a man whose wife told him he needed to say something. And what makes this whole story so uncomfortable is that Marjorie has now done this 4 times. 4 men, 4 different situations, and every single time the man either ends up in prison or publicly humiliated or left with nothing. And Marjorie moves forward untouched. No charges, no consequences, no interviews, just the next chapter, and Steve Harvey is sitting on stage somewhere telling audiences to act like a lady and think like a man, while the woman he married is allegedly writing his responses to comedians and deciding which of his kids gets attention and which ones don't. So the real question isn't whether Katt Williams is jealous of Steve Harvey. The real question is whether Steve Harvey has any idea what's actually happening inside his own house. And honestly, based on everything we just went through, it doesn't look like it.